Howdy folks, welcome back to Doing Brew. Well, today we're doing a great summertime project. I'm out here at a neighbor's house just helping them out. They have a beautiful wooded backyard and a really spacious deck that was built probably 20 or 25 years ago. The deck structure itself is in pretty good shape, but the deck boards in this heavily wooded shaded area have been rained on for years, and without the benefit of the sun drying things out, the deck boards are in pretty bad shape. Along with that, some of the joists that support the deck boards are in pretty bad shape. The good thing is that the majority of the structural members are all solid and sound. We'll just have to do a little bit of extra work to shore up some of those joists. That's called sistering, and I'll show you how to do that later on in this video. So we're gonna go ahead and finish up the demo, which is taking off all the old deck boards, and the crew is well on the way of finishing things up. I really think we're gonna get this 500 square foot deck project done in one weekend. Let's go ahead and knock it out. Now, as I said, the guys got an early start on the demo and they're well on their way. Now, during a previous deck build, a lot of the old timbers were just thrown underneath this deck. We gotta clean all that out. All that old rotting wood underneath the deck is really just an invitation for termites and other destructive pests that'll do damage to your house eventually. So not a whole lot of science behind demoing the deck. The real hard part is taking all that stuff down, drop it in the dumpster in the front yard. Next up is unpackaging, inventorying, and moving all of the lumber that was dropped off in front of the house a few days before. And our eager workforce made quick work of moving all this lumber into the backyard. At this point, we've got about 3/4 of the deck boards removed. Now it's time to do a little bit of cleanup and determine which of the structural members, specifically the joists, need to be removed. Now here I'm marking a plumb line on a very rotted joist. You can see that hole down there just below my left hand. And then simply I'm going to take the reciprocating saw. You could use a hand saw or a circular saw to make a good clean cut. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight because you're just going to be marrying up a board to the side of it. But you want to cut that rotten wood off, and you can see how rotten that board is. Certainly not providing the strength we need for our new deck. Now I'm going to follow the same process to remove another badly rotted and deteriorated joist. I'm going to mark that plumb line and then cut it with the reciprocating saw. Now we probably removed portions of maybe half of the joist. In some cases we might have removed only a couple feet of a rotten portion of the joist, and in some others darn near the entire joist itself. But before we can get to sistering up our new joist, I need to cut and install the rim joist, which is the board that goes around the entire perimeter of the deck, which all of the deck joists connect to. Now, the rim joist on the old deck was not completely ruined, but we decided to remove the entire rim joist so that when we installed new, it would have a nice uniform appearance. Now, no difficult cuts here. On one end, which I'm cutting right now, is a straight 90-degree cut. On the other side, you saw me cut a 45-degree miter cut, and that's to accommodate the 45-degree angle in the deck, kind of a design feature that you'll see on both corners of this deck. With the assistance of our crew, we're holding that board nice and level and securing it to the existing joists that were in good shape and don't need to be removed and sistered. Now, it's really important to note here that I am only temporarily screwing the rim joist to the ends of the joist. I will go back later and permanently attach the rim joist to the ends of the joist with galvanized nails. It's important to note here that a screw does not have the shear strength of a nail. So whenever you're asking a mechanical fastener to hold something in the vertical, like the rim joist, it needs to be nailed. When you're trying to secure something in the horizontal, perfectly acceptable and preferred to use a screw. Now, I'm just finishing up cutting the rib joist that cuts across the 45-degree corner of this deck. That's a nice neat cut, but I need to trim off that end just a little bit, and that's an exact opposite 45-degree cut. And then marking a line off of that joist for the corresponding 45-degree cut. Now there's the opposite 45-degree cut on the end of the board on the left-hand side, pretty simple. And then flipping the board around and making the cut to length on the side nearest the house. I'm going to set that in place. That looks pretty good, and I'm going to initially secure it with a couple of screws. Big Dill showed up to help us out and make sure everything is plumb, true, and square, and he is confirming our work. We sure do appreciate him coming out and helping us out today. And as I mentioned, here I'm securing all of our connection points with galvanized nails. Also important to note, when you're working on an outdoor project, after you cut treated wood, it's a good idea to retreat the cut end with a wood preservative.
I'm down to start at 8. I'm going to get a good night's sleep.
Now, I'm beginning to sister up our old joist that we cut out with new joist. Again, temporarily screwing, securing the board in place, nice and level, right where we need it. Hand me 2 more nails, screws if you would.
Wait, lift it up, Alex, a little bit.
Next, we'll permanently secure this board in place with carriage bolts that go all the way through the new and the old timber. I'm going to pre-drill, then I'm going to insert my 1/2-inch carriage bolt and then secure it with a washer and a nut. And then we'll go ahead and torque that down. And I like to secure the boards 2 through bolts on each end, and then multiple single through bolts through the middle of the board, spaced about 2 feet apart. This board that I'm prepping is the final board to complete the sistering of our repaired joist. This board fits in the gap that was cut when we cut out the rotted portion of the old joist. You can see how now we have 2 joists married together, but remember that first joist extends all the way back well into good wood on the existing joist. Now this one gets the same through bolting, 2 on each end and then in the middle. And this is the process to repair or sister an old joist that can no longer support the weight of the floor or the decking on top of it. Now here's an overall look of all of the repair work we did on all of the joists. We're just about ready to move to putting on the brand new deck surface on this deck, but I wanted to give you an overview, a quick look at really the extensive repair we did on all of the joists. This will ensure that this deck will last for many more years. With the joist repair complete, now it's time to put on our new deck boards. And honestly, I like to take a little bit of time at this point. I'm not in a rush to get this job done. I want it to turn out just right. So what you're seeing us do here is simply laying out all the deck boards with the proper spacing to see how we end up at the very edge of our deck. And we're fortunate in that we're not going to have to cut any boards lengthwise or a rip cut to make everything work out just perfect. But sometimes if you don't do this step, you get to the last board and you might only need about 3/4 of an inch, maybe 1.5 inches. You're going to have a hard time making that look good, and you're going to have a hard time attaching that board. So you just saw me true up the end of the board. I always like to do that because the factory cuts are never 90 degrees. Now I marked it to length to line up with my joist about 14 feet down. Made that cut, installed that board. This is an important board because you have to make sure that this board is installed exactly parallel with your facing so that you have the same reveal, the same edge on the board that's all the way out here when you're done. And we're lucky in that we're perfect at 42 1/4. Now we'll go ahead and secure this board, and we'll measure and cut our next board, which we need to go around a downspout. Now, a lot of people are intimidated by this cut. It's really not that hard to do. Just grab yourself a square or any straight edge, draw your lines out from the edge of your downspout or whatever obstacle you're working around. Take a quick measure. I like to add about 1/4 to maybe 3/8 of an inch to that measurement. Make your mark, draw a straight line, and cut that out.
Back.
Okay, keep holding.
It's my hair. Wait, did we put it? Oh yeah, we did.
Yeah, I just remembered that. Wasn't going to worry about it at this point. Yeah, hold it up for a sec. Okay, now put it in place. Okay. And as I secure that board, I want to point out that a lot of folks will stagger their joints by a joist cavity difference. I like to do 2 joists because I just don't want the ends of the boards lined up even that close. As you can see, this part of the project goes very fast. The hard work's done, and that's the joist repair and setting that first board perfectly straight with the outer edge of our deck. The remainder of the project, it goes very quick. It's cut and install, cut and install. Now this part of the deck is that small 10 by 10 wing that's off the side of the house. I have a little bit of a problematic board here to install in that to do our deck resurfacing project, we didn't take the railing off. Plus, if we continue working with our 6x material, we'll end up with just a sliver of wood there on the end, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is take a 2x10 and rip it down to the width we need, and then paint that cut edge with our wood preservative. And then we're just going to take that board and slip it in underneath the railings. That's a little easier said than done. It's a little bit difficult or maybe impossible to get a hammer into that small void, and we don't want to remove our deck boards. So just a little bit of ingenuity. Use a scrap piece of wood and extend your hammer blows with that. And the final piece goes in, and this portion of the deck is nearly complete. And you've heard of that ceremonial first nail or first shovelful. Well, here's the ceremonial last board of this deck resurfacing project. Well, it's almost the last board. But don't close out of this video yet, folks. There's some important finishing details coming up at the end. And look at that. We got a little refreshment awaiting the completion of the project. And we got to get this project to 100%. So many projects like this are easy to complete to the 90% level, and then those little details tend to linger. So the first thing I have to do is, in keeping with the original design of the deck, I need to knock off a 45-degree angle on the two outside corners. I measured my front edge reveal. That's about 1.25 inches. I'll go ahead and make a couple of reference marks at 1.25 inches all the way along the portion of the deck that I need to cut off at 45 degrees. I'm going to get a scrap piece of wood that'll be used as a straight edge for my saw cut in place, and then I'm going to measure from my saw blade to the edge of the outside fence of the saw, and then I'm going to offset by that same measurement from my reference mark and secure that board. Now I know that I'm accommodating for the fence of the saw and that reference point, and it'll make a straight cut at 45 degrees, and that'll yield 1.25 inch reveal. And once that cut is complete, I'll go ahead and back those screws out, remove my straight edge, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit that fresh cut edge with a belt sander with 80 grit sandpaper on it. You don't have to do this, but I want to remove those saw cut marks and make that edge look nice and sharp. Final step for our fresh cut edge and the entire perimeter edge, outer edge of the deck, I'm going to round over with a 1/4 inch round over bit. This will really soften that edge and give a real finished look to the entire outside edge of the deck. With this step complete, the final thing is to build the stairs. Now, instead of a traditional stair stringer staircase design, I opted for really what amounts to multiple smaller decks. This really helps to kind of soften the look of a traditional staircase. Plus, it provides a wider tread and a place for you to put some flower pots or something. Kind of nice. And then on the large front edge of the deck, really what amounts to a smaller deck, again, allowing for flower pots and such, but a real nice soft transition down. And we've wasted no time putting this deck to good use. This really was a fun project, folks, and a great way to bring folks in the neighborhood together to complete a fun project. If you have any questions about how to complete your own deck resurfacing project, give me a shout. Send me an email at doandbrew@gmail.com or leave a question in the comments. I'm happy to get back to you. If you decide to tackle a project like this, best of luck. I know you can do it. Take care, folks. See you back here next time on Do and Brew.